You're listening to episode number 2 of the Play Your Position podcast.
Welcome to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count. Here's your host, Mary Lou Kaser. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome. My guest today has an incredible story, and I think you're really going to enjoy what he shares with you. His name is Cote, and he's the award-winning author of the Amazon.com #1 best-selling book, Mobilize Your Customers. His company, Cote and Associates, creates growth strategies, marketing campaigns, and lead capture systems for businesses and organizations of any size. John is a voracious reader and invests a great deal of time researching cutting-edge trends in technology, social media, and marketing. He's a frequent speaker and panelist on these topics as they relate to business innovation, increasing revenue, and customer retention. His latest project is a daily podcast called Healthcare Elsewhere, launching in April, with a book of the same title to follow this summer. John has a keen personal interest in emerging medical technologies since he has received surgically implanted stem cells to repair his injured knee. His wife is a 2-time cancer survivor, and his son has bilateral cochlear implants. He's an accomplished pilot, having attained over 10,000 hours of flight time with serving in the U.S. Marine Corps and flying for a major U.S. airline. John, welcome to the show. Are you ready for kickoff?
I am absolutely ready for kickoff. Let the games begin.
Great. I have to say, you really have an incredible and varied background. I was reading your bio, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's some things I didn't know about you. So to start things off, why don't you share more of your story? Specifically, what do you see as your life's mission and purpose? And when did you recognize what position best suited you for accomplishing it?
For me, I guess, from the business aspect of it, it kind of started on 9/11. That was over 10 years ago now, and I was working for a major U.S. airline, as you mentioned, and then the big terrorist attacks happened, and it very quickly it became apparent that, wow, I could really lose my job here. I could get furloughed, and as an airline pilot, when you get hired somewhere, there's no free agency. You can't just go to another airline. You have to start all over again at the bottom of the seniority list, and if your airline is furloughing, probably so are all the rest of them. So it became apparent that if I wanted to have any kind of ability to move forward in life and have stability, I needed to go out and start my own company, which a lot of people find that amusing because they say, well, 95% of all businesses fail or something like that. And I was like, well, I think part of the problem is that they're failing to plan. Obviously the odds are stacked against you, but I realized that I couldn't take that chance and just wait around for something like that to just kind of come to pass. So I decided to be proactive and start going out and starting to try my hand at my own business. So I tried a bunch of different things and eventually settled on becoming a marketing agency, and then eventually that morphed into becoming an author and speaker, and that has then tied in with basically helping people in the medical tourism community is really where we're kind of branching out and reaching into right now, because we've had such varied experience for myself and my family with a variety of different reasons that we've had to travel for medical reasons. And so it became an opportunity that came to us, and it's something that I'm very passionate about because of our family history. So that's what we're working on right now.
Great. Bringing up 9/11, I think, is interesting because that was a pivotal time for, I can't imagine there wasn't one American not touched by that. You said something that I think is pretty telling, in that one event made you stop and say, okay, this is the position I've been playing. Is this really where I belong now? 10 years later, you're now in a completely different role. But I'm curious, in what ways has your pilot training impacted your role as a business owner and entrepreneur?
I think it's helped in a lot of ways. And it wasn't even just the pilot training, too. I think my time in the Marine Corps, and my wife was also a Marine, and the training that we received on leadership and implementation is very key. So, one of my favorite quotes is, knowledge is power, but I like to add one word to that, and I say applied knowledge is power, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, nothing's going to happen, right? You need to actually implement and apply that knowledge. And so that was what I kind of learned in the Marine Corps. And then systems was a really big part of being a pilot. So you don't go anywhere without running a checklist of some kind. You do a pre-flight briefing for an hour or two. When you're in the military. In the airlines, it's different. You just kind of show up at the airplane, and you have a very quick 5 or 10 minute brief on field conditions and things like that, and off you go. But you've had a lot of standardized training. I mean, the military and the airlines have spent over $10 million training us to get to the point where we are, where we're someone who can, for the airline industry, for example, I can show up at an aircraft, and you're only qualified to fly one airplane at a time, and I can actually meet the individual that I'm going to be flying with for the very first time right there. Never met him before, but we've been through the same training, the same systems. We can get into the cockpit, and within basically an hour of showing up, we can have that plane ready to go and safely fly several hundred people halfway around the world or wherever we need to go. And that all comes down to systems and proper preparation. And we have obviously a group of people behind us, the flight dispatchers who are checking the weather and what are the winds going to be and how much gas are we going to need, and the agents and the flight attendants and everyone else. So there's a whole team of people that come together to make that happen. And I don't think that the traveling public always necessarily thinks about that. They kind of just, the hassle of flying is you're sitting in the airport, it's delayed, it's a hassle and everything else. And trust me, it's just as frustrating for the pilots and the crews as it is for everyone else. But I think when you really sit down and think of just how amazing it is to be able to fly from, say, New York to LA in 5 or 6 hours, depending on which direction you're going, and get there safely, and being able to have Wi-Fi and be connected and do work, it really is amazing. And the reason that happens fairly consistently is because of systems. So I'm a big proponent of setting up systems and having them run, because if you're just out there by yourself doing it, and trying to put out all these little fires here and there and micromanaging everything, you can't really move forward in your business. It's just too hard to really make good progress that way.
So yeah, systems is something that people don't always appreciate because they are behind the scenes, and when they work seamlessly, we don't pay attention to them. It's only when they, all systems down, that alarm goes off when people start to freak out and get upset. And the heart of my show, which is Move the Chains, where a lot of different things can happen. And I use football as the metaphor of this show because it's such a beautiful example of a system, but also the unknown, because yes, you're going to show up and you know what to expect, but anything can happen. So can you think of a time, John, when you were sacked or intercepted in one of those system situations, whether in your business or perhaps as a pilot, and how did you handle that? What are some of the strategies that you have for dealing with when things just don't go according to plan?
I'll give you 2 quick answers. One is kind of from the piloting perspective. You're always prepared for the absolute worst possible thing to happen, which would be to say have, an engine fail when you're on takeoff roll and you're just about getting ready to get airborne. We have procedures that we've drilled into us and we know over and over and over again. So if there's an engine failure, we know exactly what to do, and the 2 of us each have our own job to do during that critical phase, because depending on the length of the runway and how much runway you have remaining and the airspeed you are, there's a variety of things that have to happen, and you need to make split-second decisions that are going to affect the safety of that flight. In many cases, at certain airspeeds, it's actually safer to just go ahead and go fly with just the one engine, because it's perfectly capable of doing that and then getting things sorted out, going through your emergency procedures checklist, coming back around and landing. And I think most businesses, when it comes to stuff like that, they're really spending a lot more time just kind of making up the checklist and the systems as they go along and trying to put these fires out. And then those fires lead to, bigger things and everything else. And the analogy you used in football is great. The offensive line has this great plan for stopping the defense from coming in and sacking the quarterback, and that all works great until one small system breaks down. One lineman gets faked out, and all of a sudden you've got somebody coming around on the blind side of the quarterback, and he either doesn't see them or now he's got to start scrambling, and he's running for his life and just trying to figure, is it easier to just throw this one away and take the loss, even if it means it's 3rd down and long and then we're going to have to punt? What are the situations going on? Now, typically in business, you don't have to do that split-second instantaneous kind of thing, but I think that a lot of us spend too much time kind of focusing on one thing, especially if you're a solopreneur or a small company, where okay, we need to get new customers, we need to get new clients, and you're running around doing all that, and then all of a sudden you get a couple of them, and you're like, oh, now we have to implement. So now you go in there and you're starting to try and implement, and then this one calls, they've got this problem, that one calls, and you're on email all morning long and phone and this and that and getting nothing done. Then all of a sudden you get that completed, and then you go, oh, wait a minute, we need to have some more clients. So you don't have any systems that are bringing all those things in. And, I've been caught up in that myself at many times in many different businesses where all of a sudden you just realize that, hey, this track, for whatever reason that we're on, is either not profitable or it worked, but now it's done, and now we need to move on to the next thing. And we didn't plan properly for that. We basically let that system fall by the wayside, and now we've got to kind of start over again. And unfortunately for me and for many other entrepreneurs, I think, and business owners, that you kind of fall into that same trap kind of over and over. You're like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. And then, you get busy, things go on, you get dealing, trying to hire people. As you know, hiring people can be very challenging, especially in sales. If you're trying to help someone keep your pipeline filled, that's one of the things in our mastermind group that everyone complains about the most, is they're having a hard time finding and retaining qualified salespeople who are excited to do the job, and like, hey, we'll compensate you we're happy to pay you, but it's just a difficult thing to fill. And so it feels like you're constantly running around trying to fill that position or to keep that pipeline filled, and the systems really aren't where they need to be. And so I guess that would be kind of what I'm looking at as an answer to your question, to try and figure out the best possible way that you can so that these systems are separated from each other, so that they don't break down just because you are not there, or the main person in charge of that is not there. They should be able to go away for a day or two and handle something like a speaking engagement or doing what else, and still have leads coming in on a day-to-day basis through automation or other systems.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. There's two things that you said that stand out to me. The first one has to do with finding qualified salespeople. So for a second, why do you suppose that is a position that businesses struggle with across the board to fill? Why aren't more people really good at that position, John, in your professional opinion?
That's the one that we all wrestle with. I mean, I was at a mastermind meeting out in San Diego with 15 or 18 like-minded individuals, all doing the same kind of, we're in the consulting industry and marketing, and we work all over the world. And it's not just a U.S. or American or North American problem. I mean, I'm talking to people in Canada and Mexico and Italy, over in Thailand, and lots of different countries that are having exactly the same problem. Our best guess at that has to do with personality type that exceeds and does really well at that. I'll give you a great example. So we have this woman in our mastermind group who had no idea how fantastic and great a salesperson she is. Now, she's building her own company, but right now she's the salesperson for the company. And she would go out and do 20 cold calls. I don't mean walking even into the office. I mean just picking up the phone and calling people cold, whether it be car dealerships, cosmetic dentists, and she would book 2 or 3 appointments off that. And we're going, are you kidding me? I mean, she goes, well, I had a bad day a couple of weeks ago where I didn't get anybody to commit, but then the next day I got 4 appointments. Well, how many of those are closing? And then we went through the numbers and the percentages. And I think what it comes down to is we all have things that we can do during the day, whether we're in sales or management or whatever it is you're doing. And the most painful thing to do is to pick up that phone for many of us and make those sales calls. And so we tend to, because it's a pain point, we tend to delay it and say, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. No, what you need to do is make those phone calls and get those appointments and make some sales. That's the most important thing. If you don't have that, you don't have revenue, you can't put food on the table for your family, you can't pay your employees. You got to keep that going. Even for salespeople, sometimes they get burned out, particular niche that they're in, or they're just burned out on sales in general, because it takes a high level of engagement and follow-up. And I think systems, like we talked about, has a lot to do with that. If you're trying to keep track of this in a notepad and you've got 100 people you're trying to track, that's tough. I can't do that. I've tried it, and it just doesn't work for me. We've had some people come in different organizations that we've talked to where they had people with absolutely no experience whatsoever. They trained them to their standards, and some did great, and most didn't. And then they had others who were highly experienced who came in, and a few did great, and most didn't, because they didn't want to change their paradigm of how they sell. So there just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. I'm not sure I have a great answer for you there, but that's the best that we could come up with a couple of weeks ago.
the truth of the matter is there's a perception about being in sales that is negative, isn't there?
If you talk to, for example, we're breaking into medical tourism right now, and that came out of someone who saw my book because they typed in the keywords word of mouth advertising into Google, and that happens to be in the subtitle of my book. So as a side note, if you have not written a book already and you're an expert at anything, and trust me, you're an expert at something, you can write a book very, very rapidly. It only took me about 30 or 40 hours worth of work to actually create that book, and I outsourced some of the artwork and things like that. What it did was help position me as an expert in the field, and I've gotten a lot of business off that just by being able to FedEx a copy of that book or hand it out to someone at a speaking event. This organization typed in that keyword, my book popped up. They bought it, read it, loved it, called me and asked me to come in and speak at their big, huge event with 2,000 attendees in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace. It was great. I had an awesome time, and we got a lot of good positive feedback out of that. The point I was trying to make with that was, a lot of the people that I deal with in the medical tourism industry, medical doctors have a very high opinion of themselves, as they should. They've gone through a lot of training and everything else, and they tend to have this opinion that sales are just kind of, that's icky. People should just come to us for this treat because, hey, we're the best. They know that in their head, and they think that their staff is the best and everything else. Well, every company thinks that, and a lot of them have a hard time coming to grips with the fact that you need to have a sales team, and so that to them, when you say sales, they're thinking of Billy Mays selling ShamWows at 2 o'clock in the morning on TV, some TV commercial, and it doesn't have to be that way. We're really big on telling story, and I know that's a big part of your background as well, Mary Lou. Tell the story, the success story of your patients. Maybe some, you don't have to go out there and say, well, I'm Dr. Smith and I've done this and I trained at this university and that and this and that and the other thing. Honestly, nobody cares about that. All they care about is, I have a problem. Can you solve my problem? And if you can, then they'll start vetting you out and start figuring out whether or not they want to do business with you or not. And so in the medical tourism field, because of that kind of attitude, we've had to try and start breaking down some of those barriers and explain to them that sales doesn't mean that you necessarily have used car salesmen, and I hate to give those guys a bad rap, but going out and knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, come to our country and get your hip replacement surgery or whatever. No, it's all about telling the story, making a hero out of the person who is your patient or your number one client, and let them tell your story for you. Let them say how awesome you are. And it's not just a testimonial. You're actually telling the story in the background of pain that they were suffering with, whether it be hip or knee or some kind of cancer treatment or something they couldn't get in the U.S. or it was too expensive or what the issue was, and allow them to tell the story. And if you tell enough of those stories, it will resonate with the people that you're trying to reach, get them to know, like, and trust you, and then choose to reach out and call your team and hopefully set up an appointment that you can then close into a surgery. It's not that it's new, it's just that for them, and I think CEOs, not just even out of the medical field, for CEOs it's kind of like sales is just a different animal, and they definitely have a different opinion of kind of almost a downward-looking opinion of that. And those of us who are in sales, of course, we have a much different opinion. I think it's a very noble profession, and I can't remember who said it, but someone was saying once that if all the salespeople in the world stopped working for a week or two, the whole economy would crash. I mean, look around you. Every single thing that is in your office or in your car or wherever you are listening to this, everything that is around you or on your person was sold. The clothes, the car, the phone, the TV, the books, everything had to be sold in some way. So it's I'd like to see people have a different opinion about the profession, but I think I might be tilting at windmills.
Well, I like to say, to add to that if you're married, you're in sales, because that's one of the biggest sales jobs we have to do is find somebody that we spend our life with and have children with, raise children with, go side by side with. And I think...
Oh, yeah, and children are the best salesmen.
Oh, are they ever? Oh,
Dad,
my gosh.
Can I have an ice cream? No, it's almost dinner time. And then they've got their objection handlers down, and they know exactly what buttons to push with you. And, usually the answer is going to be no, but they're extremely persistent, right? They'll take no, because unfortunately as parents, we tend to, no, you can't do that. Don't stop touching that. Don't do that. Watch out. No, that'll burn you. Don't do that. Especially when they're young, we tend to have this tendency to kind of parent from a position of no instead of figuring out how can we give them experience where they can do it from a yes that won't harm them. And it's a more difficult way to go about doing it. If you've been a parent, you understand what I'm talking about. It's just difficult sometimes, and they're constant and consistent and dad, mom, mom, mom. And of course they know that, okay, what does I want to ask for? Well, dad's just going to say no flat out. So maybe I should just go to mom. So they know how to run the sales routine. I mean, I think kids are probably the best salespeople on the planet.
I would agree. Having two of my own, I have lived through that, and they know how to trigger my points of breaking down and giving in, and they also know how to spin a good story. And I just get a kick out of kids. And I think that in general, adults, we could all learn some sales strategies from our kids or other people's kids that would probably actually work pretty well out in the world as we're out there talking with people. Which another thing you brought up, John, that ties in with this is this idea. You talked about having written a book, which, by the way, I have read, and it's fantastic. And I learned so many new little things about the whole mobile economy, which is an area of interest of mine as well. And one of the things that you said, though, earlier is that the way of doing business has fundamentally changed in the last few years because of technology and because of the systems that are now available really across the board. You can be a solopreneur and have access to them, and you can be an international conglomerate and have enterprise level systems. But at the end of the day, the systems are in place or designed to make your life more automated, a little bit easier, because you are getting into something I think a lot of people are faced with is we want to play our position really well. We show up in our businesses with something that we are super good at. It may be we're the visionary. It may be that we are the salesperson. It may be that we can create amazing copy or graphics or video or something. So that's our area, right? But because of the nature of launching a business, we have to play a bunch of different positions. We have to be the coach. We have to be the water boy. We have to be sometimes we're playing offense. Sometimes we're playing defense, and it's crazy making. It's part of the journey, and those who are able to get through it and recognize this is not forever are typically the ones that go on to have very successful businesses. And you and I both know people like that.
Yeah.
But talk for a minute, if you wouldn't mind, about people who are in that situation. What advice, because you've lived it, you know, what's one word of advice that either comes from your own experience or a wise person that's been influential in your life that can help people get through this early phase of having to play every position?
One of the best books on that particular topic that I can possibly think of is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, and probably many entrepreneurs have read it before. If you haven't read it in the last 6 months to a year, read it again. I read it at least once a year just to remind myself to stop doing it. You probably heard me reference that earlier, and that's a Michael Gerber phrase. And what he's talking about is basically just because you are a fantastic baker, you make the world's best cupcake. Okay, and so there's, Gigi's Cupcakes came out and they exploded, right, and went crazy, and everyone went, wow, I want to do that. I can do that. I'm going to open my own version, or open John's Cupcakes here in Huntsville where we reside, right? So I'm going to open that, and it's going to be great, and it'll be awesome and everything else. You may very well be the best cupcake maker in the world. Certainly we can all make a better hamburger than McDonald's, but we don't have the systems that McDonald's has. We can't compete with McDonald's. And when you get out there as a solopreneur and you go, you do your stuff, you buy all these equipment, you open your store, and you're great at baking, well, then all of a sudden you realize, well, I got to get the door opening. I got to get people coming in the door. So I got to do marketing. I've got to do accounting. I've got to figure out how am I budgeting all this? How am I hiring people? Where am I taking the time to do that? Where am I getting from? How am I going to train them? And so all of a sudden you're into things that you never really thought about, which is, I like to call it, people have an entrepreneurial seizure. They have this great idea and they go, wow, this is just, everyone keeps telling me this is great and I should open a business and doing that. And just because you're really good at a particular thing doesn't necessarily mean you should be the CEO of that company once you open it. You may have to hire somebody else to run it for you. And I understand that for me, when I look at it and I talk to people and I talk to a lot of different companies about their marketing, the biggest thing I get is when they get started, most companies are undercapitalized. They're either bootstrapping or they didn't get enough venture capital money or VC money or getting bank loans or however they're doing it. And so the issue comes from marketing, from my perspective and my niche. By the time they get around to, okay, we got everything all in place, now we got to open the doors. Well, that should already have been in place. That should have been part of the plan from the get-go. And now they're kind of the end and everything went over budget. And now they're going, well, how are we supposed to market this? I don't know what to do now. And so they come to me and say, well, we don't have a whole lot of money. Can you just make us a viral video that'll make us famous and bring a whole bunch of people on? I was like, yeah, if I could make viral videos consistently, I think I'd be a billionaire, because nobody's figured that out. I mean, you can do things to help get more consistent results, obviously, but creating a viral video like that, and I'm sure you've probably heard that same kind of comment, Mary Lou, but it's just a frustrating thing. So that particular book goes through, you need to go out there and say, okay, this is what the baker does. The baker has to do these steps. You set up a checklist and you put it in the manual. And then you hire somebody, you train them once, and hopefully you can actually do a video of it, right? So that if that person leaves, you can just have the next person coming in, watch the video. This is how you make the dough. This is how you do this. This is how you decorate the cupcakes. This is the temperature, all this good stuff. So you don't have to keep doing that over and over and over again. You create the system once, and then allow other people to go in and utilize it. And so do that for every single thing that you have so that you can work on your business instead of in your business. And I know that's almost overused at this point. People have probably heard that many, many times before, but it's very true. And I think that for a lot of us, we're looking for that really cool piece of software or that really cool thing, this new high-tech stuff. Just keep it simple. Just follow those simple tenets, and I think that will serve you well as far as getting you out of that kind of solopreneur mindset where you're running around putting out fires and trying to do everything yourself. And I understand that for a lot of people, it gets to, well, I just don't have the money to do that, so John, it's not possible for me to do that. Don't accept that. Don't say, I can't do that. Ask yourself, how can I do that? Figure out a way to do it and make it happen. And that's the best advice I guess I could give you. And that's what I tell anyone who I'm working with who's starting up or having these kinds of problems in their companies.
Well, that is terrific advice, and I'm getting a visual of a solopreneur or a small business owner who has, by some amazing, stroke of luck as well as a great game plan, has gotten the ball down. They're in the red zone, and they can see daylight in the end zone. A touchdown is just right there for them. And at this point, let's score a touchdown, John. If you could share, I think the Michael Gerber piece is really excellent. I have read that book as well, and I know that listeners of my show are familiar with it. And for those who aren't, I will definitely make a note of this book in the show notes so you can go reference it, because it is a must read. Give us one or two more offensive strategies straight out of the playbook of John Cote that listeners could implement right now. Something simple, because you said that word just a minute ago. Simplicity is key. It doesn't have to be complicated. A couple of things that they could take away after listening today and say, yeah, that I can do.
Sure. I would say that for me, I've gotten a few of these closing techniques from coaches of mine and business coaches, and from a few books and people that I've met who wrote these books. Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff is a great way to kind of go in there and get some ideas on how he actually structures these multi-million-dollar deals. And how he does that is, whether you do it for a multi-million-dollar deal or a $10,000 deal or a $2,000 deal, it's all basically the same. And he is very offensive minded. Some would say he's actually offensive in the way he goes about doing it. I mean, he's very forward thinking and is not afraid to, make a little bit of waves. So it might not be for everybody the way that he does it. So that would be another good resource for you. One of the things that I like to use that I learned, actually, I kind of relearned. I had heard about it, I had forgotten about it, and then started implementing it again. And it worked great for us on closing a deal recently. Was, you're there in the red zone, you're trying to make that last push, and you can see the business owners, they're interested, they want to do it, and really what's going through their mind is fairly simple, in my opinion. They're sitting there thinking, okay, I've given tens of thousands or perhaps even millions of dollars to marketing people in the past, and we've lost money. Time and time again, it's been a waste of time. TV, radio, print, billboards, these social media people, this and that and the other thing. And so in their mind, they're thinking, what is the risk? If I'm going to do a deal that's worth, $20,000 or $100,000, the risk is that I'm going to lose that money and it's going to be wasted time and I'm going to look stupid. So if it doesn't work, and they're pretty much assuming that it might not work or it probably won't work. So your job is to convince them that this is a good course of action for them because there is going to be a revenue rainbow basically for them at the end. What's the money that they're going to get out of this? So I try and frame the conversation in terms of return on investment in dollars and cents. So as an example, we were talking with a client recently that I'd actually worked with for several years, and we'd done business with them, and it was about doing a book, about creating a book for them. And the first thing that one of them said when they walked in was, "I can't even write a thank you note, John. How am I supposed to write a book?" And I kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, I understand. I was a Marine. How did a Marine go out there and write a book that became a bestseller?" And they kind of laughed. So we talked about the systems that we have in place and everything else. And so we're going through the whole process, and they're getting it. They understand this sounds like a good deal for them. And then it kind of, it came to the price, and I quoted the price, and they went, "Ooh," and you could see they got kind of scrunchy face. They get, when your forehead gets all kind of scrunched in, and you can see they have that look of pain, of disconnect on their face.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay. So you're like, okay, great. So this was more than they were expecting, and you try and give them all of the benefits to them and everything else. So I said, okay, I can see that this is a number that was bigger than you were considering. So while we're sitting here and contemplating this and whether or not it's a good idea to move forward this, let's consider this. The product or service that you sell, this happened to be in the medical field. The service that you sell that would be conducive with what the book is about and everything, the people that are going to get the book and say, yes, I want to come and get this service. Approximately, what does that cost per patient? It's about $1,800. Great. And how much does it, what's the profit margin? Oh, it's like $1,500. So it's like, 75% or whatever that number is. I said, okay, so this is going to cost you X amount of dollars to create this book. And if we go in there and just sell, say, 2 of these per month, do you think that your sales team could probably sell 2 of these services per month? Oh, yeah, we do a lot more than that. I said, okay, great. So if this book helped you to sell 1 of these a week, do you see where all of a sudden you multiply that out times 52 and look at the revenue? Do you see where the value is in doing this book? And are you probably going to get, and they're shaking their head up and down. I said, and you're probably going to get more than just once a week, right? And then you can do video that goes along with it and social media and tie it all in together. You can do a book launch party and all this other stuff. And so they're just kind of shaking their head, and you can start to see the analytical side of them, coming around and then realizing, okay, this isn't just some kind of, we're going to make a book and we're going to make, no, you're not making money off the book. You're making money off of people reading the book, seeing you as the expert and coming in to do your thing. And that's how we ended up closing the deal. So, a little bit of a long story, but the point was that tie what you're doing in and show them the revenue pie, show them how this works. And if the number's too big for them right off the bat, you can always say, well, look, we can mitigate some of the risk by taking the initial amount to a lower amount, and then we'll take a percentage of back-end sales off of that, the profit. And some people are like, okay, great. Now you have skin in the game, and they feel like, you're not just kind of throwing stuff out and seeing what sticks. You're actually going out there and have an active interest in making it succeed. And a lot of the businesses that we work with really seem to like that.
Yes, making it more of a partnership versus going in and seeing it just as dollar signs for you and your company. That is brilliant. And also the whole idea of showing them the numbers. That's a piece that I know it took me as a business owner a long time to get to the point where I actually would sit down and map out numbers. But I'll tell you, numbers don't lie. And if you can put it into their language of how much the return is going to be based on what their revenue streams are. It's brilliant, John. That's a great piece of wisdom. Wow.
Thanks. I can't take credit for that. I've gotten that from others. But is there really anything new out there, I guess, as we've talked about? It's just getting these systems out there and doing things like this and having the knowledge and ability to do it at the exact right moment in the sales process and knowing when to leverage that, I think, was what I learned the most out of this coach. And it worked spectacularly. And I could literally hear my coach's voice saying the words as they were coming out of my mouth. And it was just so natural. And there was no real sales involved at all. It was just showing them, look, here's the benefit to you. And if you don't think this is a good fit for you, that's fine. I'm not into, high pressure sales or anything like that. We can move in a different direction, or, maybe it's just not a good fit for you. And then you can always bring out the competitor aspect of it. This is kind of, if they say, well, we don't really think it's for you, you can just say, okay, I understand and that's fine. I appreciate you guys taking the time to meet with me and everything. Just so you know, I'm meeting with 4 or 5 of your competitors over the next 2 weeks about this same project. So if you want to change your mind, I understand, but I'm only you're only going to have a day or two to do that, because somebody else is going to do this. We've done this in many industries, and it works really well, and we know that someone else is going to pick it up, and we can only work with one particular industry in an area to be fair to them, to everyone else. So if we did this deal with you, we would not work with any of your competitors. And you can kind of see the pain of disconnect of that sometimes, and they kind of get a little wistful sometimes, and sometimes they'll call you back, and sometimes they won't, and that's fine. You move on to the next person on the list and try and close it with them.
Absolutely, because there's plenty to go around. And
there's
a lot of reasons why the timing just may not be right. They weren't anticipating the budget that you proposed, and the whole idea of it's okay if they say no is really an important piece too, that we in business can't hear enough, because sometimes the no, it stings. You get so excited, and it might be a client that you really wanted to work with, and you've built up all these expectations. And at the end of the day, there's always that chance that they're just going to say, no, this isn't going to work for us. And it's not about so much of having a thick skin as it is about putting it into perspective. And that's something that I learned along the way, and I think a lot of people do, is the deeper into having a business of your own you go, the more you realize that, listen, it's just the way it is. This isn't personal, it's business, that old cliche, but it's really true. It's not about you. It's about what they need at this time. And if you can put it into their language, even I love that strategy of bringing in the competitors, because we are all competitive at some level, and we don't like having something, it's the takeaway. Ooh, yeah. They're going to, oh, wow. I mean, I like John. He's sitting here talking to me. I'm curious and interested in what he's saying, and he's going to go to so-and-so. So yeah. I would encourage people that are listening today, if you are looking for a little script or strategy, is listen to this again and write down what John just said, because that little tactic is brilliant and it works. It really, really works. So
I'll tell you two other real quick ones, Mary Lou. One of them is that I say frequently, if it feels like maybe this is going off the rails and it might not be working or whatever, I'll tell people flat out and say, look, time is extremely valuable. I believe that time is our most valuable resource, because we all have the same limited amount, assuming we all live to be the same age. And no is the second best answer that you can give me. I don't want to waste your time. I don't chase after people. If you don't want to do business with me, that is perfectly fine. I'd much rather have you just politely tell me no to my face right now, and I'll say thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and we'll part as friends, and I've got no problem with that at all. And that way you take the pressure off of them of, well, how am I going to turn this guy down or a girl down and this and that. You're not chasing after them. I just don't want to play that game. And then the other aspect of that is what was brought up to me, and I'm guilty of this. I'm raising my hand right now. It's called nesting. And what you're doing is you're nesting on these leads. So you've got these one or two great leads that you're like, wow, if I get this deal, it's going to be worth X number of dollars, so our bottom line will be able to expand and do this, and it's awesome, and it's the perfect niche for us, and I really know how to help these people, and I love the way they work, and I really, really want to work with these guys. And so you're really invested in the process, and you're doing everything you can, and it's kind of dragging out month after month or week after week. And what you're doing is you're sitting on your little nest eggs of 2 or 3 leads that are your most promising, and you're kind of leaving the rest of your sales pipeline empty. And then all of a sudden, you get to the point where none of them close, even though you thought you had a good chance of closing them, and now you're sitting there going, oh, well, shoot, now what do I got to do? Now I got to start all over again because I don't have anything in my pipeline. So you got to keep that pipeline filled, and you got to know when it's time to cut the cord and just say, you know what, these people are never going to buy. Or never buy in at the level that we want. And you can keep in touch with them, and that's fine, but don't just sit there and hope. You don't want to be a hopreneur, right? You don't want to be that person that's just hoping that these people are going to come to you because you have the, man, if they would just buy it, it's just such a great product. I know it would help them. To me, I looked at it, if they don't buy it, it either wasn't the right fit for them, or if it was something that I did wrong, then I failed to properly sell it to them. I failed to show them the benefit, and that's on me, not on them.
Oh, that is awesome. That is great. Thank you for sharing that, John. That's fabulous. And as we finish up here, what is the best way for people to connect with you? Obviously, you are a fountain of wisdom. You are a great role model. And I always like to showcase my guests. So tell us the best place to connect with John Cote.
Sure. You can go to johncote.net. It's spelled C-O-T-E. And right now that's pointing to our tactical division, Rocket Social Marketing. And you can see some videos on there that kind of teach you about the different ways to market and advertise and why there's some free reports on there. So there's a bunch of free stuff. You don't even have to opt in for it. I don't even ask for your emails or anything. There's just some videos and free reports that'll teach you some of the things, that we kind of talked about today. And then moving forward, and probably we haven't tied down the exact date yet. The Healthcare Elsewhere is the podcast that we're setting up for medical tourism. So if you've ever considered getting into going down to Mexico or Costa Rica to get dental work done, or going to a foreign country, or even going to a different part of the United States or Canada or wherever you live to travel somewhere, this podcast is going to be for you. It's all about helping people to discover what's available out there, get leading edge people in the industry talking about these kinds of things. And that'll be at healthcareelsewhere.com.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait for that. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to take some of my own medicine here, and we're setting up systems right now for getting together and basically I'm trying to hire a virtual assistant that can handle getting the appointments set up for the interviews, because we're going to try and do an interview a day. We're trying to do basically for at least the first few months anyway. I don't know how sustainable it will be, but this is what we're shooting for. We want to do an interview a day, so that every day there'll be a new podcast in there of about 30, 35 minutes. And that's going to take a lot of systems to make happen. So that's what we're working on right now, is building the systems out, getting our interviews in place, getting 20 or 30 or so of them set up in front, and then moving forward and continuing on. And so we'll see how that goes, and it'll be an interesting experiment. I'll be happy to keep you up to date on how it's going.
Absolutely. We definitely want to keep up to date on that. So just letting everybody know that everything that John talked about today can be found in the show notes at maryloukaser.com/podcast. And then just click the link called John Cote. And again, that's C-O-T-E. John has shared some unbelievable wisdom with us today. And John, I really want to thank you for your time and your generosity. I am really looking forward to that podcast and the book that follows it. I think you're onto something that has a lot of value as medical costs are skyrocketing and people are looking for alternatives that are viable and safe and are going to give them the results that they want. So congratulations to you. That's fantastic.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Mary Lou. I really appreciate you having me on the show. It was a great time. You're a great interviewer. I enjoyed, interacting, and hopefully your listeners will get a lot out of it.
Thank you, John, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mary Lou. Have a great day.
You too. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's guest as much as I did. And remember, you can get the show notes from today's episode at maryloukaser.com/podcast. I would also so appreciate it if you would take a few minutes and leave me a quick 5-star review on iTunes so more people can find this program and benefit from the wisdom my guests share. I look forward to seeing you on future episodes, and in the meantime, it's a great day to get out there and play your position.
Thanks for listening to the Play Your Position podcast, where your story matters and we make it count at maryloukaser.com.